And I'm going to give you an introduction in the policy framework, which is useful for the whole day. So I hope, so the ones who are in the morning here, they benefit because they can use it in the afternoon as well. I'm going to give you a slide inside, and I'm not going to speed it up too much, but I'm going to go through it with a nice pace to get quickly to the next speaker. So first, I'm going to give you the policy framework with the challenges we have for inland navigation. I think that's good to know. And after the challenges, we have some current solutions, and I'm going to dive into the financial ones. And then the rest of the day is going to be all technical. So I'll be the only one who's touching the financial ones. And if there are questions in the chat, I'll watch them, and questions, of course, can be asked here. And please wait until the microphone reaches you before asking the question, or shout it and I can speak to it in the microphone for you. All right. So first we have the policy framework. In October 2018, we had the Declaration of Mannheim. And the Declaration of Mannheim is coming from the Central Commission of Nautical of the Rhine, so the CCNR. And in December 2019, almost 1 year after, we had the European Green Deal. And you can see the emission reduction targets of the CCNR and the European Green Deal. They are quite the same, but not entirely, because the intermediate year, the intermediate goal from the CCNR is 2035, and the one of the European Green Deal is 2030. But we have also different base years. So the European Green Deal has a base year 1990, where we compare the levels for the reduction, and the CCNR has a base year of 2015, where they compare the emission reduction. But that's a small hustle, let's say, because the end goal is more than 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and in air polluting emissions by 2050. More than 90%, in our opinion, and from the definitions, it's not only our opinion, is zero emission. So if we talk about zero emission vessels, we are talking about more than 90% reduction in emissions, both greenhouse gases, CO2 and other ones, methane, and also air polluting emissions, as we know, nitrogen oxide, soot particles, and so on. So that's the policy framework. If we dive in a little deeper, we see that every year European Commission is moving forward to implement this European Green Deal. And the first sign we saw was in 2020, 1 year after the European Green Deal, and that was the European Strategy on Sustainable and Smart Mobility. And here I took some articles of this publishment, the most important ones for inland navigation. I think you can already see it. Transport by inland, waterway, and short sea shipping will increase by 25% by 2030 and by 50% in 2050. And that's compared to 2015. So it's quite a modal share or a modal shift that we're talking about here. On the other hand, we also see the bottom one, all external costs of transport within the European Union will be covered by the transport users at the latest by 2050. We're talking about internalizing external costs. That's what it says here. And at this moment, we know that the cost for air polluting emissions and also for greenhouse gas emissions, well, there is no real cost at this moment, and that's also the reason why there is no business case at this moment. So the European Commission clearly has a strategy, or at least a more detailed goal, followed up by the Green Deal, and that's good to know. 1 year after, in 2021, in July, we saw that the Fit for 55 package was released. And 55 doesn't mean that the goal for 2050 is moved to 2055, no. It means that the reduction targets of 55% are quite important. So that's what the 55 is about. And in this Fit for 55 package, we saw a package of European regulation that's being addressed and that's being looked at closely to see if something needs to be changed and if something needs to be emphasized in order to have to reach those goals by 2030 and 2050. And what we see, for example, is the emission trading scheme. I'm going to talk about it later because it was extended to the maritime industry. This means seagoing vessels. It's not extended for inland navigation, but it's something that happened. On the other hand, we see the Energy Taxation Directive, and we know that at this moment, marine fuels are exempt from taxation in inland navigation, and that's due to the Act of Mannheim Act. But the Energy Taxation Directive was talking about taxing all fossil fuels, including inland navigation. This didn't went through because there was no unanimous voting So at this moment, we say it's in the fridge, but we don't know when it's coming back. We also have other rules, the regulation on alternative fuels infrastructure and also the Renewable Energy Directive. Of course, infrastructure is quite important. For example, we see already the traces of onshore power supply. Those are being broadened quite a lot in the ports as we speak. And the Renewable Energy Directive, the final one, is the directive that says how many biofuels must be mixed into the fossil fuel at this moment. And that's also a number that's being increased. So far the Fit for 55 package. And we know it sounds a lot, but it's all happening behind the screens while we are doing the transport we do. So I think it's good to know that these things are coming at us. Finally, NIAIDIS, well, I'm not going to talk about it anymore because Nick already broadly developed the NIAIDIS action plan. But two things that this initiative is aiming for is moving more transport by inland waterways and a gradual shift towards zero-emission inland vessels. And why I put this here, because number B is the one that we're going to talk about the whole day. So the challenges. We have a European fleet of over 16,000 vessels, and more than 62% of these vessels are active in the Rhine region. That's good to know. So the West European fleet is quite a large one if we compare to the whole European fleet. We also have river cruise vessels, of course, 405 vessels, and these are the numbers of last December, so they are quite actual. What is funny is that less than 0.4% today of these vessels is green. So less than 0.4%. If you want a number for the ones who are very quick in calculating, that's around 60 vessels that we define as green vessels at this moment. So green in the sense that it's going beyond what's obligated today. That's green. So 60 vessels out of 16,000. Of course, we can't say that we are moving massively forward towards a green and a zero-emission fleet. And these are the real numbers. And it's not to ambush inland navigation. It's because there are bottlenecks, because there are some real challenges and reasons why the inland navigation is not moving forward that fastly. I divide them in three bottlenecks. The first one is the financial one. There is no business case at this moment. And part of that is because the external costs at this moment are not internalized. At this moment, if an entrepreneur, a ship owner invests in a green technique, he's not usually, it's not always the case, but he's usually not gaining more money in the freight transport because he or she has a green vessel. That's the reality today. Customers are not claiming or asking massively for a green vessel. We call this market failure. So that's the first big bottleneck. The second bottleneck is a technical bottleneck. Okay, let's say that we do find money, we have subsidies, we have a customer who's willing to think beyond the state of the art today. We have a business case. Then which technique should I invest in? It's quite a hustle, it's quite a challenge to pick which technique you want, which one is a no regret investment, which one has enough infrastructure, and so on and so on. And the last one is a lack of a regulatory incentive. At this moment, we only have the European non-road mobile machinery. It's a very long regulation, but in short, it's the NRMM, and it's a regulation that says what engine you should install when you build a new vessel or when you install a new engine on an existing vessel. And at this moment, all the entrepreneurs, they well know it's a stage 5 engine, and this stage 5 engine, we can compare it with a Euro 6 engine of the trucks. But of course, with a newly built rate of around 100 vessels a year, we will not be renewed by 2050 with 16,000 vessels, right? If we do the mathematics. So the CCNR concluded that largely eliminating both greenhouse gases and air polluting emissions by inland navigation is no longer an option if we want to stay competitive, if we want to stay sustainable, environmental friendly as a mode of transport. And I think that's an important statement here that the CCNR is making. So these graphs, most of you will have seen them before. They show you that there are possibilities. And that's what I want to bring today as a message. We know there are challenges with regards to going to zero emission. There's a lack of infrastructure and so on and so on. But already many other techniques that give a large reduction in emissions are possible today. And that's what we're going to talk about today. There are possibilities now. If we follow a business as usual and we don't do anything, we just do what we are doing today, then we see that we will not reach the zero emission by 2050 because the greenhouse gases, the NOx and the particulate matters are not reduced enough to go for 90% reduction and thus to zero emission. And that's the business as usual. And you can see the brown one in the corner is the CCNR2 engines or below. And on the top right corner, the beige one is stage 5 diesel engines. And they already give you a huge reduction in NOx and particulate matter, but of course not in greenhouse gases as long as you are using fossil fuel. But what is interesting is that we see the massive impact of stage 5 and Euro 6 marinized engines compared to the CCR1 and 2 engines that the fleet is existing of. So for NOx and soot, we have more than 80 and more than 94% in reductions. That's massive for a sector. So if you install a stage 5 engine today or a Euro 6 marinized engine today, you have a massive impact already, almost reaching the zero emission targets for NOx and for soot particles. That's quite impressive. And the same accounts for after treatment systems. So if you have a perfectly working CCNR2 or CCNR1 engine, which doesn't have to be changed at all, you can consider after treatment systems and you have the same impact almost. It's a massive impact, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. There are so many possibilities today. But if we look at the CCNR study and we see the pathways, we also have the conservative scenario and we have an innovative scenario, which I'm going to show you on the next slide. And the conservative scenario is actually the one that comes close to what's possible today and what we will see in the technology workshop this afternoon. If you see the colors and you look well, you will see that there's a lot of dark green, and dark green means a stage 5 engine with HVO. That's a biofuel. And with the stage 5 and HVO combination, you almost reach the 90% reduction emissions and therefore the zero emission targets. So that is possible today, but of course it comes with a price. What we also see is some other techniques. We see some batteries in yellow, we see some hydrogen in blue and some methanol in pink. These techniques are all also there in the conservative scenario, but not as broad. And if we look further to the innovative scenario, we see that it's actually the same table, the same graph, but dominated by these more innovative techniques, the batteries, the hydrogen, the methanol, and so on, and less by HVO combined with stage 5. If you ask our opinion, we think the truth will be in the middle somewhere, right? We will see how the transport mode will develop and how techniques will develop and infrastructure and so on and so on. And it all depends on European projects, as we will show you also today. But it is important to see, besides that the truth will be in the middle, that of course you will have to make a distinction between fleet families. If a solution works for one fleet family, for example, let's say we have dry cargo, small area for transportation, batteries may work. But if we have push boats with a very large power demand, well, batteries won't work. So you will have to keep looking at the fleet family you're focusing on and what kind of technique works best with this fleet family. And that's also something that we all, also policymakers, need to take into account, that there is no holy grail, there is no one size fits all. And I think that's also a mental shift that the entrepreneurs will have to make, although they are quite used to the differences between the fleet families, of course. Well, this is the financial thing that I'm going to talk about. It comes with a price tag. And if we take the two pathways, and I said the truth will be in the middle, so I took the average, we are talking about a price tag of additional costs compared to the business as usual. So compared to the state of the art today, we have an additional price, total cost of ownership of 7 billion towards 2050. So what we're looking for, ideally, is 7 billion euro. That's what we're looking for. So if there are interested parties, just raise your hand. No, but we are looking for 7 billion euro, and this is the price from a study that's been published in 21, but the investigation was done in 2019, 2020. So these numbers are already outdated, and I didn't take inflation into account in these prices. So, but we can all make the calculations right. We are looking for quite some money if you want to make the transition to zero emission. Also considering this conservative pathway that I talked about, so the more easy pathway, let's say. This is also a very good one. So the capability of vessels to invest in a stage 5, because, okay, we're looking for a lot of money. What can the entrepreneurs do themselves? How is their capability to invest? On the top table, you can see that the capability to invest in a stage 5 compliant engine. And on the bottom, you can see the capability of a vessel to invest in technologies towards zero emission. That's quite a difference. I told you that stage 5 is already a massive jump forward in NOx and soot particle emission reduction, but stage 5 is also obligated today. As of October last year, the transition period ended. So if you have a new vessel, or if you have an existing vessel and you want to install a new engine, you are obliged to install a stage 5. But still, we see a gap. We see a percentage of grant needed for stage 5, for state of the art. Again, this is a massive example of market failure. The obligated stage 5 engine is not so convenient for all entrepreneurs to just install, because there's a lot of additional costs. And the gap that we see here for stage 5, the investment gap, is between 30 and 45%, depending on the fleet families we look at. So that's also not so small gap if we think about it. The second table, towards zero emission, we have the same numbers, but they are a bit higher in the gap. We see an investment gap from 40 to 63% there. So again, we have a gap. Then some people talk about the European Reserve Fund as the holy solution. Let's take the European Reserve Fund and we will fix the gap. Well, that's not true, unfortunately. Nick de Mera already talked about it. The European Reserve Fund is, for example, used to finance partly the IWT platform. But the remaining means are around 26.8 million. Well, the reserve fund, therefore, if we compare to the 7 billion, would be good for 0.4% of the costs. So the European Reserve Fund is not the solution for this problem. And I think that's a message that needs to be said. So what is a solution? That's what you may be wondering. Well, at this moment, if we look at the financial bottleneck, we see that there's some talk about a greening fund, an inland waterway transport greening fund. And that fund could be financed via contribution basis, for example, a surcharge on the fuel, or maybe a surcharge compared to the measured emissions of the vessel. That doesn't matter at this moment. It's just some study work that's been done, and you could see that it would vary between 4 euro cents per liter bunkered fuel or 8 euro cents per liter bunkered fuel. These are examples. These are no decisions. That's a large disclaimer I'm giving here. These are just studies, right? For a greening fund, how we would contribute to it. But something went wrong here. But the numbers are still here. That's good. So if we look at these studies for reserve fund, well, on the left, you see the TCO gap, so the 7 billion, which is still small because I didn't take into account the inflation. That's 100% of the TCO gap. If we would take the sector contribution based on a 4 to 8 cents surcharge, that would benefit the fund for 18 to 37%. Then we have the reserve fund. Well, let's say we use all of it for this mean, then we will have 0.4%. So still we are looking for 82 to 63, so somewhere in the middle. So we are still looking for 70% of the money, right? That's still a large amount. So we are relying on subsidies. We are relying on governmental support, and also on banks who make the financial system more attractive, and also on customers who are willing to pay a little more in their freight rate for a green vessel. It's an all-in-one solution. We need everybody in the chain in order to reach the 70% to close the gap. I have I have a lot of text on this slide, but you can read it another time. But the main points here is that the impact of the Mannheim Act is quite important, because if you want to make a fund and we want to make a surcharge, a contribution based on the fuel, it's not so easy, because the Mannheim Act actually forbids it. You cannot make a contribution, a fixed contribution on fuel because of the Mannheim Act. So we would, possibility number one, we would do a voluntarily contribution, or possibility number two, it would be a mandatory contribution, but not on fuel consumption. So still all these questions are open. We are in the midst of a consultation at this moment. If you have input or if you have questions on it, you can always reach out to me and to the platform, and we will handle those into the consultation. Lastly, the ETS, the emission trading scheme. I told you it's being broadened to the maritime industry, to the seagoing vessels. And that's going to be in the very nearby future. Some people are talking about expanding ETS, the emission trading scheme, also to inland navigation. And for those who are not familiar with ETS, it's actually a cap and trade approach where you sell the carbon dioxide. And there's a limited amount of tickets, of carbon dioxide tickets, and each year the price of carbon dioxide is made per ton of CO2, and then a certain amount of tickets can be sold, and the ceiling is being lowered every year. And that's the cap and trade approach. We know that road industry is in it. We know maritime industry is going to be in it. We know large energy industries are in it as well. But inland navigation could be in it as well. If we would be in it, also calculations have been made based on a price of €80 per ton CO2. And also this one is an old price. At this moment, I've heard a couple of weeks ago, it's already around €100 per ton CO2. So it would be already a higher impact. But based on €80 per ton CO2, the fuel price, because it would affect the fuel price, would be an increase of €213 per 1,000 liters per cubic meters. That's quite an impact, right? At this moment, that would be an impact, I think, of 130% on the fuel price. And it's on average. If the fuel price is quite low, then the impact would be 150%, of course. But on today's rates, I think the impact would be around 130%. Comparing it with the 4 to 8 cents on gas oil, we see that the contribution system would have less of an impact on the industry. So what's better? Well, we don't have the answer yet at this moment. We are comparing it, we are researching it, we're looking into it. But that something needs to be done, that's clear. And that there are some smart solutions needed, that's also clear. So that was my presentation in short on the policy framework and on some financial challenges. The rest of the day, we're going to talk about the technical challenges and some things that are possible today. And I hope everyone is going to be intrigued and is going to be informed by it. I'm going to look at the chat real quickly. I don't see any questions in the chat. Are there questions from the audience on this part of the presentation? No? Okay, thank you very much. Then I'm going to continue with the next guest speaker.